holiday program. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September 27th meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I will call the meeting to order and entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move approval of the agenda.
Second. Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Franzen. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Director Beerbaum, will you please read our purpose statement?
The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential.
Thank you. And our first agenda item this evening is our COVID-19 update, and we will turn it over to Dr. Arnold.
Good evening. As usual, we'll start on our first slide with the Story County data presented. And Story County remains at a high level of community transmission. The most recent CDC numbers at the time I prepared the report are as follows. Story County is currently at a high level of community spread with 251.21 total new cases per 100,000 persons in the past 7 days, which is an 100 case increase from the report at our board meeting 2 weeks ago. Our 7-day positivity is 10.2. Additionally, over the past 7 days, 24% of the new cases in Story County are in those 0 to 17 years of age. We've seen about a 1% increase in vaccination percentages in Story County since our last meeting. Currently, 55.7% of Story County residents are fully vaccinated. An additional 3.6% are partially vaccinated, so only having received 1 dose. And of the population eligible for vaccination, those 12 and up, 62.5% are fully vaccinated, and an additional 4.1% are partially vaccinated. The next slide includes our student and staff data. At the time this report was prepared, we have 17 students and 2 staff members who are currently positive for COVID-19. We have had 61 total students positive and 13 staff who have been identified as positive since the beginning of the school year. In analyzing that data, 65% of the positive cases in students are pre-K and elementary. And then if you do a little age ranging on that, 78% have been those in PK through 6th grade. That trend mirrors that in positives in our staff. 85% of our positive cases in staff are in the PK elementary area, and 55% of those positive staff have been breakthrough cases in fully vaccinated staff. On our next slide, you'll see some other COVID-related topic updates. The first item is related to our mask requirement. We instituted a mask requirement on September 17th. This impact of a piece of the layered mitigation strategies to decrease classroom spread may take 2 weeks after implementation to really start to see that just the way the virus works. One of the unknowns this year was how or if masks would impact with the spread of Delta, and there was a lack of publications on this. The CDC shared 2 studies last Friday related to universal mask wearing for the school year. One is a study out of Arizona in the 2 largest Arizona counties where they had both mixed K through 12 school masking policies, so where some were masked and some were not masked at the onset of the school year. The odds of a school-associated COVID-19 outbreak were 3.5 times higher in schools with no mask requirement than those with a mask requirement implemented at the time school started. So where masking was versus non-masking, those in non-masked areas had 3.5 times higher risk. The other study that was shared by the CDC on Friday included 520 counties across the US and linked increases in pediatric COVID-19 cases during the start of the 2021-22 school year. That increases were smaller in US counties with school mask requirements, than in those without school mask requirements. So those were two, again, with peer review. That's not something that's out there yet, but those are two studies recently that have been published regarding mask requirements. We do have a mask accommodation process for those with medical or religious reasons that people are unable to wear a mask. For students, the process begins with the submission of a Google form. After the form is submitted, one of two forms are then sent to parents. Those forms need to be completed for the process to be finalized. For our medical accommodations, a physician must complete the form, and for religious accommodations, the parent must complete a notarized religious accommodation form. The next item is just a very brief update on our dashboard. Just to share something that we're doing now, instead of posting the daily case count and positivity percentage, we've moved to just sharing the CDC community transmission indicator of high, substantial, moderate, or low, and then links to the specific sites that produce that data, so the CDC and the NIH. We're getting confusion in emails of, well, this one says this and this one says this, and we're just going to say what the category is, and people can link to whichever data source that they choose. And then finally, I've been working with Story County Public Health on staff COVID vaccine boosters. The CDC recommends the following groups should receive their booster shot of Pfizer's COVID vaccine, and it has to be at least 6 months after their second dose. So these are the should group are those 65 and older, those 18 and older living in long-term care settings, and people 50 to 64 years old with underlying medical conditions. The next category is that the following groups may receive a booster shot of the Pfizer's COVID vaccine, again, 6 months after their second dose, based on their individual benefits and risks. So this is where that decision process comes, because they may. And that is people aged 18 to 49 years with underlying medical conditions, and then people aged 18 to 64 years at increased risk for COVID-19 exposure transmission because of occupational or institutional settings. And that's where teachers and school staff fall into that setting of an increased risk. We will have signups for the booster shot clinics probably within the next day, just finalizing some times for that. And that completes my report. Please let me know what questions that I can answer for you.
So we are getting close to the 6 months for some of our stuff. Okay.
We're past the 6 months on some of them. The one group, the group that was in our last vaccine clinic, their second dose was on April 16th. So their 6 month would be October 16th. So we will have to then offer one after October 16th because they are very holding strongly to the 6 month mark on that. But the rest of them that received it at least through us would be prior to that. So they would be eligible for perhaps even as early as this Friday.
And we did just give Pfizer then? Okay. All right.
Yes, we only gave Pfizer here.
Okay. Thank you.
I would just like to take advantage of this opportunity to thank our staff in all the buildings who are helping to implement the mask mandate. We just sat here and voted, and they are the ones that have to really make it happen. And I'm very grateful for their support and their assistance in helping keep our schools safer.
I guess one thing I wanted to say, because I think it's definitely related to this. I just wanted to take a second, publicly thank everyone that's written this to provide feedback. I know as board members, may not be obvious, but on topics like this with wide interest, most of the feedback we get from the community is through emails. I think by now we counted and we've gotten over 200 so far. And I assure you that I know I've read every one of them, but I don't always get a chance to reply. So for those of you at home or maybe that hear about this, please don't assume that you're not being heard just because you don't get a reply. You're being heard. It's just there's not enough time in the day to reply and still, do all the other things we do. At last count, well over 85% have been in support of the mask mandate, and I thank them. I mean, we've gotten some very good feedback and a lot of different opinions and ideas. That said, I know that not everyone supports the mandate really enjoys wearing them. I know personally I don't like wearing a mask. I find it annoying, and trust me when I say I am a parent and my kids tell me every day how much they don't like it. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. So to me, I just wanted to say, I think what we're doing is the right way to help the community and help keep kids in school. As many of you know, last year was just way too hard on kids, and we have to do whatever we can to keep them in school. But one thing I wanted to share with the board that I had heard this week is it's made me very happy to hear about some of the community support for these efforts that maybe we don't normally hear. So for example, I heard that the Lutheran Church of Hope recently said, I'm going to read this, regarding the pandemic, our church has tried to remain consistent with local school district mask policies. As Christians, we choose to love our neighbors and the district's efforts to minimize the spread of COVID would be less effective without our cooperation. With this in mind, Hope Ames will require masks to be worn. I know there's a lot of other groups that are equally supportive, and I just wanted to publicly thank them for that, because we all are in this together. And I hope that by working together, we can help move this forward and keep our kids in school. I mean, that's the biggest thing. So just wanted to take the opportunity to say that, because I know the way these meetings work, we don't always get to talk back and forth, but wanted to thank everybody that has sent us emails.
Thanks for that, Alan. Anything else for Dr. Arnold or comments from the board? All right, thank you, Dr. Arnold. Then we will take any comments from the public on the COVID-19 update. So if you have a comment just on the COVID-19 update, you may either come up to the front if you're here, or you may raise your hand if you're on Zoom, and you'll be given permission to speak. Hi, and you can go ahead. And if you just want to go ahead and start off by stating your name and address, that'd be great.
Yeah, my name is Christopher Kasak, and I live at 5616 Maryland Street in Ames. And I have two kids in 6th and 7th grade in the middle school. And I've heard a lot during the meetings, and I respect everybody's opinion, even if I don't agree with it. But I keep hearing follow the science. Less than 600 kids have died since the start of the pandemic, and that is horrible, and that is tragic, and I feel for every one of those families. But when does this stop? When do the masks stop? When does the fear that we're instilling in our children? Like, I know children personally in my neighborhood that have had COVID, asymptomatic, completely fine, recovered from it, and they drop their mask for a split second outdoors. They're like, oh my gosh, does that have COVID on it? Does that have COVID on it? And they're being serious. So my question, just in general, it doesn't need to be answered right now, is when does it stop? Like, when do kids get back to normal? When do we stop instilling all this fear in them every single day? Whether it's this, whether it's the police, whether it's anything. Like, we have instilled nothing but fear in our children. And back a year ago, in January of last year, I 100% was okay with everything, because we didn't know. We didn't have the facts. We didn't know anything. Now that the data's been coming out, granted, it's been a little choppy. We don't know the effect that masks have on kids. And I heard it not last meeting, but the meeting before, or maybe it was last meeting. We don't know the effects on these kids, what it's doing to them. Now, do I think that physically the carbon dioxide that they're breathing out? No, because the majority of what they're breathing in is the outside air. So that pocket that's a little bit higher than occupational standards, that's not really dangerous to them. But it's the psychological effects. There's been several violent instances in school. My kids tell me about it daily. We have kids with anxiety all over the place. Like, I can name at least 6 fights in the past 2 weeks. And if there's any correlation, which I believe that there is, between those two, I heard last meeting, I heard it's all about, it's probably not the mask, it's probably the COVID. Yes, it's because we've been instilling this fear in them. There is like a 0.008 chance that a kid will even be hospitalized, if not die from it. And I think taking in all the facts is necessary. Maybe setting some guidelines. When does it come? Because right now I looked at the CDC map, and it is all high transmission. It's going to be. There's more kids being tested. Like, that's just the way it is. But these kids, from what I've seen, and I could be wrong, are not being hospitalized. These kids are not dying. Like, everybody has a date with this virus. Vaccine, no vaccine, mask, no mask. Everybody does. That's why I'm very pro-mask. If you'd like to wear it, I'm very pro-vaccine. If you and your doctor think that it's right. But generally speaking, we have to find a way to come to an end, and we have to come together instead of fighting about it all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Is there anyone else in person who would like to comment on the COVID-19 update? All right, we will take comments from our Zoom attendees, and the first one is Hannah Brandt. You've been given permission to speak.
Hi, yes, I am just calling on behalf of my kids who currently do wear masks to school. And I just would like to thank the staff and the board members for going above and beyond. But I just feel that it should be a personal choice for the parents and the family to have their kids wear a mask or not. And especially for my kindergarten, because she has a little bit of a speech delay. And with the mask, it's harder for her teacher and for her to understand. And so I just would just like it to be a personal choice and just not have the mask mandate in place anymore, and go from there. That's what I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Hannah. Casey Cruz. You've been given permission to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Casey Cruz, 2500 Suncrest Drive. I'm calling to respectfully ask that you rescind the mask mandate immediately. When you force children to wear a mask that poses almost no threat to them, that is the definition of child abuse. You are teaching children that the air is toxic and everyone around them is sick. Do you know the consequences of forcing kids to breathe through dirty masks layered in spit, dirt, and sweat every single day? What about children learning to read that need to see lips moving to enunciate words? What happens to a child's immune system that has to wear a mask all day, every day? Masking our children violates their constitutional rights and nullifies individuals' state rights for autonomy, setting an absurd precedent on federal overreach. Saying that science shows masks work when there isn't any data supporting that argument in a school setting is fraud. I know many medical professionals locally and across the country who agree that these types of masks do nothing to protect from COVID, yet will lose their jobs for speaking out. Let parents decide what they want for their own kids. The research the board has presented is very much one-sided, and much of it is not presented correctly. This is about power and control. By reinstating these mask mandates, you are in essence, by the very act of revoking the rights of the families to make their own personal choice, doing the exact same thing to families that you are complaining about the state doing to you. This isn't about me trying to convince you to change your mind about what's best for your own health, your family's health, or the health of our district students, because quite honestly, it's not my business. This is about civil liberties. Regardless of where you stand on masking, I support your choice to wear a mask or not wear a mask. Please remember that families in this district come from all walks of life, hold a variety of different views, and are not only capable of making the choices that are right for their own families, but have the God-given right to do so. It is your job to advocate for all children and families in our district. You cannot do this with a one-size-fits-all approach. Please rescind the mandate tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Connie Nichols. You've been given permission to speak. Connie, you may just need to hit the unmute button.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. My son is in the high school, and he's a ninth grader. And yes, he went through the masking back in the middle school, and it was very hard on him. He's a heavy set kid, and it makes it hard for them to breathe. It gives them headaches. I think that the masking is unnecessary. It's not proven to prevent COVID. I think that it should be a choice. When my son entered the high school this year at the beginning, He even told me that there were several students already wearing masks on their own. There is no need to force children to wear them. If they choose to wear, I think it should be a choice. I have a granddaughter that's in the elementary school, and I feel that it has inhibited her learning as well. It's not healthy for them to sit there and breathe their own air in and out of a mask that could be dirty. They sneeze in them, and then now they're gonna be, inhaling that sneeze all day long. I just feel that it's not necessary, and I think you're gonna have more kids sick by wearing these masks all day long, especially the high schoolers that don't get that mask break like the elementary does when they get to go outside and breathe fresh air. In the high school, they don't get that opportunity. They have to wear it until they eat lunch, or possibly, maybe sneak it off in the bathroom. But other than that, they have to be forced to wear it all the time.
You're not doctors. You can't.
I feel that you guys rushed into this mask mandate without giving the parents proper opportunity to voice their word. And so that's why I'm voicing mine now. I really wish that you guys would just make it a choice. Encourage those that want to wear them to go ahead and wear them. Make sure that there's no bullying going on about either way, whether they wear them or don't wear them. But I feel that the mask mandate should be rescinded. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Connie. Okay. Is there anyone else who has a comment on the COVID-19 update? All right, then we will move on to our discussion items. And our first discussion item is our board committee update. We will start with the policy committee.
The meeting minutes are attached. I will not go over it because these are the policies that we will be discussing in just a couple of items in our agenda. But our next meeting is this Wednesday.
Thank you. And Equity Committee, Director Bankin was not able to be here tonight, so we will get an update on the Equity Committee at our next meeting. And our next discussion item is the CAUSE Student Club. And would you like to come on up? What's that? Yes. Yes, please do. And you can pull the microphone if you want to just grab it. Or here, Dr. Hawkins is coming with one for you. Thank you for being here.
No problem. So good evening, board. We are the student leaders of the Ames High School Prep CAUSE, Citizens Actualizing and Understanding Sustainable Environments. My name is Aurelia and I'm a junior at Ames High.
My name is Leslie and I'm also a junior at Ames High.
My name is Lily and I'm also a junior at Ames High.
We would like to start by thanking the board for listening to student voices and considering the proposed resolution to address climate change through education, clean energy, and sustainability. Our resolution, prompted by whereas, asks the Ames Community School District, administration, faculty, and students to take an active role to mitigate the climate crisis. We want to make it known that many people in the district in many roles have expressed their support for mitigating climate change and recognizing that climate change is not partisan and there is broad scientific consensus that human activities are the cause. Our responsibility is to ensure that we are not contributing to this crisis. It's essential to our leadership in schools our leadership in schools are paying attention to this issue, as children and us and students are especially vulnerable. Accumulation of greenhouse gases will impact current students' life and quality of life and the future generations' lives. Climate change is a pressing issue with unimaginable magnitude and urgency. According to the International Panel on Climate Change 2031 report, climate change and disastrous effects are already in motion. We are now at imminent risk of reaching the 1.5 Celsius mark, where the effects on our climate now become irreversible. Actions need to be taken now to limit climate change.
Now, while we're asking the district to consult the experts and develop professional recommendations in order to take these acknowledgements and affirmations into actionable steps, we have outlined a holistic plan for the district to create a culture of sustainability and take responsibility for environmental impact. These actions have been included in the ACSD sustainability resolution, which will be emailed to all board members at the end of this meeting, but we will be highlighting specific actions that we are compelling this district to take key action on. The first is hiring and investing in energy consultants. We believe that's important that this district is engaging with energy consultants to create a baseline of the greenhouse gas emissions that we are producing and how much of our energy is currently met through the renewable resources, and conduct an environmental impact analysis. This way we can gather data to create a plan and create targets to increase our renewable resource use and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Especially as our district is in the midst of developing facilities and constructing a new school, it's an essential and opportune time that efforts are made to be more energy efficient and develop pathways for renewable energy sources such as solar and wind power are taking into consideration for both the environmental and economical benefits.
In addition to tracking carbon emissions, we ask that the school make an effort to increase recycling by investing in recycling services and bins at the schools. We also ask that you develop initiatives to include sustainable agriculture practices in menu planning and take a focus on reducing food waste, as food waste is detrimental to the resource recovery plant's incineration processes and results in lots of Ames trash being sent to landfills instead. Above all, we strongly encourage that the district develop and take on a climate action plan that will comprehensively address what we have spoken about. Finally, we ask that the school district listen to and work with student organizations in order to make these changes come to fruition and make sure that they represent all people in our districts. This plan is not an idealistic fantasy. This resolution, based on the Iowa City School District resolution, has been adopted by the Iowa City School Districts, and their district has taken subsequent steps to evaluate their carbon emissions. Iowa City is exceeding their goal by reducing greenhouse gases emissions by 48%, ahead of schedule by 9 years. While this resolution is not the final product and is subject to change with discussion in what is possible for our district, we encourage that the district start the discussion surrounding sustainability and adopt this resolution. Thank you for your time, and we're happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you so much. And it is an honor as board members to be able to hear from our students. I'm so happy that you all brought this in front of us tonight. So thank you for being here. Are there questions that board members have?
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you for being a spur to action on the part of the district. I do wonder what role you see for student organizations going forward. As you know, we hope all high school students will graduate in 4 years. There's a lot of turnover and ebbing and flowing in interest. How do you see sustaining that level of commitment?
We have a lot of clubs at the high school that are dedicated to like environmental and sustainable practices. So there's a lot of student interest. And a lot of these clubs have many members. So there's always new students coming in, whether they're underclassmen or they're moving into the district. And there's just a lot going on in these clubs, and they're always bringing in new people. So we're building these leadership teams and training people to be able to pick up after we leave the district, and just like keeping that interest going. So there's always going to be people that are interested in this. And then these clubs can also play a role in like advocating for this. They can come to meetings like we are and share student opinions of what the school district is doing. And also they can offer ideas that students have just to make sure that voices are being heard. And these clubs are like open to everyone. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. I think also what we are really advocating for is, it's true that clubs do tend to like ebb and flow and disappear in the school, but we're hoping by having the school district take on this resolution that there is sustainability that is provided by the administration actually dedicating themselves to take on like a plan and really attacking it from like the front on. Because I feel like if the school isn't able to like provide a resolution, really dedicate themselves to the central issue, then students won't be able to be as excited about advocating the issue in the same. So we hope that you will be excited about taking on this resolution.
This is a final note. If I'm correct, we did the club fair for Ames High, and was it 61 people? 62 people signed up to be in cause. So we're definitely having an increase in people wanting to advocate for social justice and climate change. So that is really important to us.
Is that an all-time high for the club, 62 members?
Don't know for 100%. That's an all-time high, but it's sure a lot of people.
Very cool. I am excited about signing up for the resolution, and I wonder if we could hear from Superintendent Vincent. What does this look like logistically?
We had time for just a brief conversation with the administrative team at the end of last week. And I think we are very interested in what role might the students be interested in taking in terms of carrying out some of the types of things that we know make a difference. We don't have an energy consultant, and I'm not sure where we will be budget-wise, but I'm going to guess that might be a heavy lift for us. But there are other things that collectively, as individuals within the system, that we might be able to take on. So we would really appreciate additional conversation, and maybe there's a section of this. I also know that some of the new buildings, why they maybe didn't go for the LEED type standard, they were certainly, as I understand it, built with many of those components without maybe the expense of all the certifications, et cetera. So there's good work happening in the district in this area, and probably some subsets of energy efficiency, environmental activation that we could take on, particularly if the students are willing to help us with some of the labor issues.
So I am very supportive of the idea. And I've been sitting here thinking, how can we help bring it to fruition? One question I'd have, and it relates to something Dr. Vincent just talked about with budget and consultants. Have you talked to the city at all? Because they're doing a citywide climate action plan right now that the city is paying for, that this could potentially be a part of maybe. I don't know if that'd be something to talk to them, because realistically, when I was looking at it, I love the idea. I think the two things we've got to figure out about the funding aspect of how you get a consultant, how that's funded, because the money we would have to spend for it is the same money we have to spend on teachers. So that's a really tough choice. Then the second thing I'd say is, in the resolution, it had a date of having it done by December 31st. We'd probably need to have a different date, because that's like overnight for the way the district does things. So don't take any of that as like negative feedback, though. It's like, how can we make this happen? But one thing I'd recommend is maybe trying to talk to the city.
Yeah, so one of our cause leaders who isn't able to present today, he is on the input committee for the city action plan, and it's definitely something that we will be working with, making sure that, or at least providing on our input, so Ames community can hopefully be involved in an action plan with the whole city. And yeah, our resolution, we are definitely subject to discussion and input and change, and whatever feedback the district has for us. We just hope that it is taken with immediate concern. And yeah, do you want to ask something?
And I guess one thing maybe I should ask, because I kind of maybe spoke a little out of turn, I should ask board members, do you think this might be something that maybe trying to talk to the city would be good? Because I think it'd be really interesting to have the school district as a big part of the city be taken into account and a part of the overall city planning too, if that's something they might consider. But first, is that something we'd want to do?
I think it's a great idea. I think it's a good train of thought. I do think that we have to, these are our kids, right? Like we're the board members of, these are our kids. I mean, so I feel like we have to give them their okay they'll have some street credit. I mean, if we say, look, the school district passed this, then they will have some weight, they will have some weight on it instead of us passing them along. They have that. If we pass it, if we stop, that means that we are supporting our students' initiative. The city can do it and we can all work together, but first I think we have to, on our own, support them and support this initiative because they're talking about, these are our kids and they're talking about something that we are in charge, right? So I get that working together, which is a good idea, but I think we should take the first step.
Yeah, I think one thing that you made mention there that I hadn't thought about, yeah, it does sound like we'd be asking them to talk to the city. Maybe it's more like we should talk to our staff that meets with the city frequently and ask them as part of a way we can help support the students in this cause, whether they could take it to them, for example.
Right.
See if that might be a way to deal with some of the things like funding and seeing it in an overall bigger picture.
Yeah, because they're already doing their job, right? They're here.
And I do love Paula's idea and concept too of seeing if there's ways to keep involving the club in kind of some boots on the ground things of what can be done inside the schools that are more easily accomplished, maybe, and what we can do to help that.
And probably COS already has ideas, right? You already have ideas for what could, I think you mentioned that at the beginning, that you had some ideas, right?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of projects and initiative that CAUSE and various other clubs at the Ames High School are working on. We mentioned recycling and food waste, and so we hope like that those plans will be carried out, but we genuinely do need support from the district and permission and funding in order to make those projects into a reality.
I appreciate all of you bringing this to us and the discussion. I echo the other board members that we appreciate the opportunity when students come to us with something that you desire to see some action on. Board members, do any of you recall, we had a conversation about this a year or two ago, and there was an internship program that we said at that moment we couldn't have, I cannot recall, and I could maybe look it up, but it just dawned on me when you were all talking, but there was an internship program and an opportunity to bring somebody in that could provide some support for this. It was during a work session. Does anybody, I see a couple of you nodding heads that maybe, okay. I'll maybe look back through my email tomorrow to see if I can find it, but it was something that I feel like it was brought to us by a parent and a group of students encouraging us to look into it, but we were too late at that time.
Yes.
That's how I recall it. Is that? Okay.
I think it was at university they had a program or had a program that we could have an intern I think it's to do like an audit, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And it was brought to us a little later.
Okay.
So yes, I remember that as well. So maybe that's something that our staff
Maybe our
can
staff could-
look
yeah.
into it.
Just a thought, Dr. Vincent.
So I guess, Dr. Vincent, what do you think is the best way to move forward on this? I mean, as far as board involvement, we could have it go to a committee, but it sounds like there's a lot of things that you and your staff would need to be doing.
I think it would be reasonable for us to have additional conversation and consider what might be a likely starting point. And especially if something like the food waste, there might be many things. And I think if we have a chance to look at what seems reasonable, have some exchange. So I have your names. So if we could be in touch and think about maybe just a project that already the students would like to take the leadership on and considering how we could support it. I really am not aware of where the city is with their planning efforts. So that's another piece that I think I could personally take on, is just reach out and make that contact and see if there's a place for us to partner there. It would be helpful, I think, for our board leadership to look at the resolution and consider whether they want to bring that back, and if so, in what format, so that we might have several of these pathways for you at the same time while we investigate.
Yeah, so Michelle and I could look at the resolution and see if they're like the date that Alan mentioned and some of those things that we can maybe come to an agreement on, and then bring that back to the board for action at a future meeting. And the way that I see it, this is, you're the experts, right? They're the experts. You're the ones that are doing the research. And this is a great
student board partnership, right? It's like a dream come true. We always talk about like what is happening with our students, how are they doing? Well, these students are partnering with the board. So that's a pretty big deal. And I don't know if it's crystal clear, but I'm 100% supportive of your initiative. I am so proud of you. So proud. Thank you.
Well, I want to say one thing. When you say this impacts our generation, that resonates with me because I think there's very few things that we can see that are going to impact you guys in a dramatic way. And the fact that you're sitting there at your age as juniors in high school and speak so eloquently about these issues that are impacting our world gives me great relief to think that you are going to be our future leaders. So thank you.
You know, Greta Thunberg said, change is coming whether you like it or not. And I appreciate your inspiration and your encouraging us to try to make some changes. Again, looking forward as you are. Thanks.
We will be definitely sending you all our resolution by tonight, and you'll feel free to contact us through our email that we have. And again, thank you for letting us speak, listening to student voices, and being so receptive to what we have to say. We're really looking forward to this partnership and excited for the school to take on responsibility for the climate crisis. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And do we have any comments from the public on the update from the Cause Club? Okay, we will move on to our next item, which is our June and August 2021 financial reports, and I'll turn it over to Chris Stenson.
Good evening, board. As you know, we hold our books open for 60 days past the end of the fiscal year. So we closed the books at the end of August, and we filed all of our statutory financial reports by September 15th. And so I'm able to present the results for June at this point. So we ended the fiscal year collecting 100.3% of the general fund, estimated general fund revenues, while expending 95.8% of the expenditures. We collected 115.9% of total revenues, but that was mostly because of all the bonds we issued. If you remember, this time last year, we had a bond item on the agenda for every meeting for about 6 months. And while expending 93.2% of our total expenditures. Eric, if you could pull up the attachment, the June financial report, and go to page 6, should be a yellow heading with general fund historical summary.
Loading slowly.
All right. Most of the report should seem very familiar to you. It's the same reports I give you every month out of Forecast 5. I'm going to go to a couple of different reports that you may not have seen. They're from the year-end report. So this is a historical summary of the general fund and gives you a really nice snapshot of both the revenues and expenditures and fund balances for the general fund in particular. And a couple things that I will point out is everything was, for the most part, normal course of business, except for, if you notice, the federal revenue jumped quite a bit. That is a direct result of the COVID funding that we got through ESSER. And one of the main reasons our total revenues went up in the general fund. Our expenses went up some as well, and mostly due to those COVID expenditures as well. We didn't really have a whole lot in fiscal year 20 because if you remember, school just kind of stopped at spring break last year and we were closed the rest of the year. So most of the activity happened in fiscal year 21. We did increase our fund balance from 8.4 million to 11.9 million, which is a 20.2% fund balance reserve and a 17% solvency ratio. We have 2.43 months of cash in the bank, or I should say fund balance in the bank, not cash. Fund balance in the bank, they recommend that you do not go above 25%, so we're right about there. This is a direct result of the cash reserve levies that we've done the last couple of years. We're to the point where in this budget, when we start looking, we're not going to have as much cash reserve to do because we've regained that solvency. And so we'll be looking at some other things and what will happen to the tax rate if we want to pay out some more on bonds and so forth. So if you have any questions as I'm going along, feel free to ask. Eric, if you go to the next page. This is a snapshot of the, this is a recap of the certified budget. The main thing that I wanted to point out on this page is in the far right column in the third line down. That is our unexpended balance, our UAB. Unspent authorized budget. I'll get it right one of these days. We did increase that slightly. We went from just under 3.5 million to just under 3.7 million. So we're going in the right direction on that. We have a board policy that wants it to be around 10 to 15%. So we're working on that. It went down dramatically in fiscal year 18, in fiscal year 17, we had hired some additional staff that hadn't been on budget. So we're slowly working our way back out of that. If you'll go to the next page, Eric. I got to remember that when you do it, it doesn't change mine. So the one thing I wanted to point out on this gives you the results of our certified budget. So at the very bottom in the far right 3 columns, you'll see what the certified budget was. Now we do budget in total, not by fund. So these are all funds, with the exception of agency and self-insurance funds. Those aren't part of our budget. So our total budget was $153.9 million. We spent $141.9 million. We were fairly close on those. If you instruction, we were at 94%, support services 99%, non-instructional 98%, and other 89%. The other category is construction. That's the one that's hard to project. The construction year crosses fiscal years, and so I always try to make sure I have enough budget in the current year, but that will then most likely result in a budget amendment for fiscal year 22 because we didn't get as much spent as what we had originally thought. So any questions on certified budget? So we were within statute on certified budget. The next page, I'm not going to spend any time on this, but if you've ever wondered how the unspent authorized budget is calculated, this is how. It's not quite as bad as the aid and levy worksheet, but just as bad, just about. And then at the bottom, you can see of that page, you can see the solvency. We had a $10.3 million unreserved, undesignated fund balance. So the difference between the 11.9 and the 10.3 are those funds that are held that are reserved for specific things. So there are certain grant funds that we are required to reserve those fund balances for. And so you take the unreserved, undesignated fund balance as a percentage of total revenues, and that gives you your solvency, and we're at 17%. As you go through, I've given you, Forecast 5 gives some really nice visuals in their year-end report. I need to work with them because the last 2 years have not been normal. And Forecast 5 is built on taking percentages and just kind of escalating those through. So fiscal years 23 through 26 probably aren't as accurate as I'd like them to be because we need to go in and change some of those assumptions that we made before COVID. But it gives you kind of a nice visual there as well. And then the only other, if you go to page 12, Eric. which looks like a spreadsheet of a whole bunch of numbers called cash and investments. There you go. So this is our actual cash on hand at the end of June. This is what statutorily I'm required to give you. All of the rest of it is not in statute as far as being required to be reported to the board, but cash and investments are, because the statute was written before we had things as generally accepted accounting principles. I do want to point out, although this is the statutorily required report, this is not the best picture of where the school district is. You want to look at those prior reports. For instance, I had said that our fund balance in the general fund was 11.9, where our cash is 15.9. The difference in that is our accruals that happened in that July and August time period. And our total cash on hand was 97 million, but our ending fund balance was 79 million. And of that 79 million that we had in fund balance, 63 million of it was held in capital funds. Almost all of it in the, or a good, very good portion of it in the GO bonds. So that is all I have for June. Happy to answer any questions.
I don't have a question. I just want to call attention to page 10, the graph, because I think it's easy to see, and something that IASB I have found has mentioned over the years in their financial classes, and I just think it's good for the public to be aware. If you take the salaries and employee benefits, there 80% of our general fund is our salaries and benefits. So that leaves 20% of our budget to get our paper, get our supplies, get all of these other things. And so I was adding the percentages quickly because I know that that is something to watch, but also something for everyone to be aware of in terms of, looks like a lot of money, but we have a lot of staff, really important staff that are doing really good work every day. So.
Education in general, not unique to Ames, is very people driven. And so that is a very common percentage to see in school budgets.
Yeah.
Any other questions on June? So I provided you with the August financial report because just really nothing much happens in July. So I didn't see putting two financial reports here. The only thing that I would point out, again, not much happens in July and August because most of it's being accrued back to old year. I did want to point out that the only change to the certified budget this year was that they extended, which they always have, they extended the reduction to the AEA. It's just under $135,000. That reduction's been in play for quite a few years. However, this year, besides extending that reduction, they did increase media and ed services for the AEAs for Ames portion of it by $13,000, which means there was a net decrease in the payments that will go to the AEA of $121,000 or just under $122,000. AEAs in theory are funded exactly like we are. It's a portion of property taxes and a portion of state aid. But instead of us collecting property taxes and sending property taxes to the AEA and the state sending state aid to the AEA, we keep all the property taxes. The state deducts a like amount off of our state aid, and they send all state aid to the AEA. So when all was said and done, because of this change, they reduced our state aid by $13,044 while increasing our property taxes by $12,500. Which resulted in an increase of 0.00422 cents per thousand. We're still at 1434, but that was that slight change. And the difference between those has to do with the additional levy and everything, so that's why it's not exactly the same. Be happy to take any other questions. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Are there any comments from the public on the June and August 2021 financial reports? All right. Our next update is teaching and learning, and our topic is new course proposal, Spanish Heritage course. And Erin Miller.
Good evening. Thanks for having us here this evening. As you know, in board policy, we have new course proposals. If we want to add a new course that we need to have at board approved by October 15th. And so we're bringing it to you tonight for a discussion item, and then you'll see it again for an action item later on. And I have some friends with me to help talk about the course, what it intends to be, and then you can, we have a little presentation and you can ask us some questions. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves and we'll get started.
I'm, excuse me, I'm Annie Deem.
Monica Martinez.
Julie Duncan.
Shaylee Santiago, EL coordinator here for support.
Okay. We are all three teachers in the World Language Department at Ames High, and we thank the board for having us here. We're delighted to get a chance to propose a new course for the World Language Department, and we have called it Heritage Spanish 1. This is a class that we are designing specifically for heritage language learners of Spanish, and we define that by saying these are students whose families speak Spanish at home. So immediately the question would be, why do we propose this class? And we have several reasons. The primary thing is just fundamentally the current course offerings, the Spanish 1, 2, 3, 4 sequence, which we think that's a terrific series, but it just fails to meet the needs of this specific group of students. To begin with, the courses that we offer, and especially the first two in that sequence of 4 courses, those classes are designed for students who know no Spanish whatsoever or very little. They're designed as language acquisition courses, not literacy. And this proposed class will be more of an English class for Spanish speakers to work on literacy in particular.
And just like Annie mentioned, so heritage language learners' home language is often exclusively Spanish.
So to varying degrees, the heritage language learners of Spanish, they understand and they speak Spanish really well, but they need some focus on reading and writing. So they communicate just fine at home, but they often aren't communicating with their parents in written form, perhaps. That's what they need some more practice with.
All right, we do know that improved literacy in heritage speakers of any language, that those skills transfer to literacy in English. And of course, then that gives access to all kinds of benefits and improvements in any academic material. English, obviously, anything that involves reading, history, any social studies, English kinds of courses. So we have overall increased literacy and improvement in academic performance.
Okay. So there are many benefits to bilingualism. Some of the specific benefits of bilingualism in English and Spanish include increasement in employment opportunities, graduation rates, and enrollment in post-secondary education. I also wanted to add one more, and that is maybe for the students' daily life. As I stated earlier, many of these students speak Spanish exclusively at home. Sometimes that means that the parents know little to no English, and therefore they are the main English speaker at home when it comes to maybe going to medical appointments and other situations. And we think this might help better prepare them for that as well.
This also will help the heritage language learners of Spanish to earn the seal of biliteracy. We started offering that 2 or 3 years ago, I believe. And that is like a test, but it focuses on the 4 skills. So reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And so they're very strong on the listening and speaking part. This would help them then earn a higher score and actually earn that seal of biliteracy. It's a seal that would go on their diploma, and it just provides some evidence to employers or higher education that they have high levels of 2 languages, at least 2.
All right, we want to address how has this student population been identified. And the district, and Shaylee's helped us out with accessing this data, but the district has identified 68 students at the high school who on their registration forms have indicated that Spanish is the primary language in the home. So 68 students at least.
We estimate that 25 students would be interested in taking our course based on our current enrollment in the Spanish classes.
So we're hoping that, since there were 68 students that identify with Spanish as their primary home language, that in the future we could encourage some of these other students who haven't signed up for our language classes, that this would be something they would be interested in. So we're hoping to grow this program.
And maybe even add a follow-on year. Anyway, okay, lofty goals. We're asked to address course level expectations, and we have we intend to use the Iowa Common Core standards for English language arts and literacy, because this is to be designed as a literacy class, much like an English language class. And those are broken into grades 9, 10, and 11, 12. So we will try to adhere to those in designing the course.
And we would like to mention these are the same standards that our English department is currently using, and they are board approved. So that's good.
So, and we will look for our materials and again, try to align them as best we can with those standards.
All right, so what's it going to cost? I have the budget section. So we estimated a budget of about $2,000 for teacher training. So we may go, Des Moines Public Schools, and there's a couple other schools in the metro area already offer heritage classes for their students. And so we may go do some observations and do a little partnership work on what materials are they using. And then there's a conference that we might be able to go to help us better improve our instruction in that way. And then we need a materials budget, right? So to buy some resources for the course. So we're estimating about $6,500 for the first year. And then kind of what they were saying is, so while we're using the English standards, it's still going to be a world language credit. And Des Moines, I think, offers Heritage 1 and Heritage 2. And so that counts as the 2 years of foreign language entrance requirements from universities. So that would be the pathway that we could potentially explore if this were successful, students signed up, and we added a second Heritage 2 kind of class. So for the first year, we're thinking this is our budget. And this would be taking students who are currently signed up in a Spanish class that maybe aren't fitting very well and moving into a different section. So it's not adding new staff. We're displacing a section of Spanish and putting it in a Heritage. So there's not additional staffing requirements to implement the new course. So that's kind of the big picture overview, and we would love to answer any questions that you might have.
So you mentioned a follow-on course, potentially 2 years. Perhaps this is racing too far ahead, but could you anticipate with this emphasis on enhanced reading and writing skills that this could even prepare some students for an AP exam?
Absolutely.
In fact, some of the materials that we've been looking at have that as a component of their texts. So it certainly is. It's not something that's really conceivable for a lot of these students. They don't go past, the first year of Spanish the way we have it set up now, maybe the second, because it's just not designed for them, and it's certainly not getting them toward that level of literacy that they would need for AP. But yeah, we'd like to include something like that. Okay.
Do you have students who have one parent who is a native Spanish speaker who don't quite fit into your 1, 2, 3, 4 series as well? Would they fit into a series like this, even though they're not 100% Spanish in their home?
Yeah. Shelley, do you know? I mean, like statistically? Okay. I'm assuming yes. I have them in my own family, right? And It would definitely be the case because you don't have to have two bilingual parents. And often in a home where one parent speaks another language, they will speak it exclusively. That's been the experience of many people I know, including my sister-in-law, who, and soon to be my daughter-in-law. I mean, she's my daughter-in-law, but soon to be the mother of my first grandchild. She intends to speak Spanish. She's Mexican, to speak Spanish to their kids. And my son is learning Spanish, but it's very common. And so they would have the very same issues with maybe, the lack of literacy in the language, but perfect comprehension and sometimes even, quite good speaking skills.
Yeah, I was going to say sometimes are they more delayed in speaking because they're used to listening to their parent, but maybe not speaking as much?
Well, there is research on that. Do you want to? Okay. Well, because I've read some of this research for like immersion schools and things like that, where kids are bilingual. There are early delays in literacy, but they're ironed out by like third or fourth grade, where they're totally immersed, where they come in, kindergarten, et cetera, kindergarten, first grade. But those differences they average out over the course of mid to late elementary school.
I ask these questions because I have a Spanish sister-in-law and her children understand Spanish, but they don't speak it.
Yeah.
But I know they wouldn't fit into Spanish 1.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering if this would also address those types of needs.
Yep, that's exactly true. Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder, how does this intersect with ELL students?
So we do have a fair number of our English learners at the high school that are native Spanish speakers. I don't have the exact figures for this year yet. We're still getting everybody, marked accordingly. But it would be a great opportunity for them to be able to build off their first language skills. And so, I mean, it's only going to help for them to be able to expand and continue to grow their Spanish literacy skills.
So in the 68 number, do we have those students included? Do we have ELL students included in that number?
Yeah, the 68 would include some English learners. I can comment one thing about our student information system. We can't distinguish, dad speaks this language, mom speaks that language. When it comes to how their home primary language gets coded, we can only put one language. And so there are some other measures other fields that we capture in the campus, but it gets a little messier to pull all that data. So the 68 are the home primary language says specifically they're Spanish. That's the main language in the home. There's definitely additional ones for sure.
I think it's great, by the way. Go for it.
Yeah.
And I think it sounds awesome as well. I'm really excited. And this seems like a great thing for our students. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. And we will take any comments from the public on our teaching and learning update. And it looks like we have Angela Shaw. You've been given permission to speak.
Hello, my name is Angela Shaw and I live at 5411 Tennessee Street. And I'm speaking on behalf of the Ames Youth and School Action Team, also known as ASAT. We're a nonpartisan group of concerned citizens who shine light on racial and ethnic disparities within the Ames School District. Our goal is to improve educational outcomes for children of color and other marginalized groups. ASAT is speaking today to support the proposal for creating the Spanish Heritage course at the high school. As outlined in the presentation, we agree that the creation of this course will help students reach their true identities, as well as increase their English language skills and ultimately improve their academic outcomes. Relatedly, we encourage the district to continue to ensure that the needs of students with all racial and ethnic backgrounds are represented in the district's curriculum. As research has repeatedly shown, culturally relevant pedagogy as well as curriculum are essential for fostering school connection and improvement to make sure that we have academic outcomes for students. We applaud these teachers and their hard work, and we thank them for doing this initial step for this proposal for the Spanish Heritage course. And we encourage the district to continue to invest in courses like this and invest into teachers who are taking their time and energy to bring these evidence-based practices into the Ames School District to ensure that we have a equitable curriculum and have foster a community that is supportive and inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Any other comments from the public on the teaching and learning update? All right, we will move on to our diversity, equity, and inclusion update, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Jones. Give us just a minute here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to provide some updates to you on our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. So, wait to, so be happy to. All right, so we should be on slide 2. I wanted to take an opportunity before I continue with the updates to just thank the people that I get the opportunity to work with. And, you know, we talk about the equity office. The equity office is basically made up of 2 people, myself as well as Jessica Sittler, but we have adopted some other staff members within the district to be a part of the equity office, such as Shaylee Santiago, Candace Collins, Nicole Carnado, who is the associate principal at the middle school, as well as Eric Meek, our data specialist. And if you notice, I put Ag Hoc on there. So I've borrowed her on many occasions to provide data for the office. And I just wanted to just say thank you to these individuals, for they have definitely provided hope, inspiration, and collaboration in this work. And I just always feel like it's just good to have people, great people around you to encourage you, to inspire you, to challenge you, to share ideas with and receive ideas from. And so I just wanted to take this time and say thank you to them. So I want to share just a few of our products of the district's equity work. And again, this is just really scratching the surface of disparities needs addressed in our district. And so what I'm going to share with you, I'm just going to quickly share a few of these strategies that we've done or work that we've done throughout the district. I keep trying to change the slide for my laptop. So I've just kind of bolded some of the ones I wanted to highlight. So for instance, we have, last year we started the Critical Consciousness Family Learning Series. We was really excited about that. We had the opportunity to provide that virtually for families who were interested in learning more about critical consciousness and what it means. And we had certain topics that we met with families once a month. And we'll be starting again tomorrow night at 7 p.m. And so if anyone is interested in joining us to learn around specific topics around equity, we'll be starting that tomorrow at 7 p.m. And we'll be talking about the House File 802 and sharing that information with our families who are interested. We also had the opportunity to partner with Iowa Safe Schools, who provide staff training for LGBTQ learning. And so we'll also be starting that up again in October. And so we've been really excited about the partnership with Iowa Safe Schools. And we started as well the equity newsletter. We created that last year as well. We had very limited time with our teachers. And so we had to figure out other creative ways to get resources and information and events that were happening in our community, whether it was at Iowa State University or in Ames community itself. And so we provided them resources and information centered around equity. And so we used the equity newsletter to do that. And we share that once a month with our teachers and staff. Finally, we're excited this year. We've had the opportunity to visit 2 elementary schools so far, providing the building equity walkthroughs. And so we've been excited to just get out in the buildings and just see the great work our teachers are doing and see the exciting, I was going to say faces, but exciting eyes of our elementary students. And just a really opportunity to build positive relationships with our teachers and let them know that we're there to support them in their work. And so we're really excited about that. Another opportunity that we've had to provide for the district, again, we really improved on our communication with our families, especially our multilingual families. And again, I just want to highlight one of our staff, Shaylee Santiago, who has done a really great job providing knowledge and best practices with our teachers. And of course, I wanted to highlight that working with AEA, we received an immigrant grant to be able to purchase multicultural, multilingual, diverse character books for pre-K through 12 students. But at this time, we focus on purchasing a lot of books for our elementary students. And I have a picture to show you that. And this picture provides only a small image of the number of books that were filled in conference room C. There were books all over that room that Shaylee was able to stamp and to get them out to our elementary schools. And so I definitely wanted to highlight that work. Another area that we really improved on was with our engagement with our community. Most of these organizations that I've highlighted in the slides, they are the ones that reached out to us wanting to learn more about the equity work in the district and to let us know that they support the work. And so we've had a lot of opportunities these past 2 years to get out into the community. Of course, last year we did a lot of these community engagements virtually. And I just wanted to highlight that partnership and relationship with the community and thank these organizations for reaching out to us and encouraging us and inspiring us in the work that we're doing around equity. Again, there's another list. And again, I couldn't put all of the community organizations that have reached out to us and partnered with us in the work. And again, I just want to say thank you to those organizations. The new legislation. Dun, dun, dun. So as many of you know already, we've had quite a few new regulations, legislations from our state legislators as well as our governor signed the new legislation in May of 2021. There are a list of 4 that I will not highlight tonight. I will only highlight the first one, which is House File 802. But also, you know, when you have time, I would encourage you to really drill down and read the other 3 because I think they are just as important and impact the work that we're doing in the district, specifically around equity. So the Department of Education, just to provide a little historical context, On September 22nd, 2020, the former president initiated an executive order combating race and sex stereotyping in September of last year. And then at the beginning of this year, in January, that executive order was rescinded by the current president with an executive order advancing racial equity and support for undeserved communities. June 9th, 26 states introduced some type of bill similar to the executive order from the last president. However, only 9 states, you can go to the next slide. Only 9 states enacted some type of legislation to impact classroom conversations around racism and sexism. I think it's important for us to know that in Iowa, I know we've heard a lot of communication and reports around critical race theory. However, Iowa's law is importantly different from others in that it does not mention critical race theory. So if you read through their policies or the legislation, you do not see critical race theory highlighted in our legislation. However, what they did highlight are the 10 specific defined concepts that are not allowed. And I just want to highlight a few of them quickly. Again, there are 10. So before I do that, what is it? What is House File 802? And I want to go through these because it seems to be a lot of misinterpretation, a lot of fear and concerns around what does this particular bill state or law requires. So first, this law requires school districts to ensure any curriculum or mandatory staff or student training provided by an employee of the school district or by a contract hired by the school district does not teach, advocate, encourage, promote, or act upon specific stereotyping and scapegoating toward others on the basis of demographic group membership or identity. This law also requires school districts to discourage students of the school district from discriminating against another by political ideology or any characteristic protected under the Federal Civil Rights Act of 1964. This law requires school districts to also prohibit its employees from discriminating against students or employees by political ideology or any characteristic protected under the Federal Civil Rights Act of 1964. And so I just want to say that although political ideology is highlighted here, it does not cancel out the other characteristics protected under the Federal Civil Rights Act of 1964. All right. The specified defined concepts. And again, I want to highlight only 3. There are 10 on this. On the first slide, we have 5. I want to highlight 3 just quickly. So the specified defined concepts say that one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. So it prohibits anyone that's providing training or any curriculum that's provided by the school district. It cannot teach or advocate or say that one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. The second specified defined concept is that the United States of America and the state of Iowa are fundamentally or systemically racist or sexist. The third one I want to highlight is that an individual solely because of the individual race or sex is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. The keywords that I wanted to point out here, and I've underlined them, are inherently, fundamentally, and systematically. This basically means without the ability to change. And so I just want to provide the clarity that if I'm being a director of equity, if I'm leading a training with staff, if I'm leading or providing curriculum for our students or any type of materials that I'm purchasing for the district, we have to assure that none of the materials or none of the lessons that we are teaching is saying that the United States or a race or a sex is inherently or does not have the ability to change. So that's why I thought it was interesting that these 3 words are placed throughout the guidance when you read them, because what they're saying is that if you're going to teach around equity, you have to teach it in a way where it's taught in a way that you have to allow space for people to change. Just quickly, 7 and 8. It highlights that an individual, by virtue of the individual race or sex, bears responsibility for action committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. And then number 8 is the one that is very interesting to me as well, that any individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of that individual's race or sex. So what does House File 802 not do? It does not inhibit diversity, equity, and inclusion training for students and staff. One of the key words you'll see throughout the guidance is the word mandatory. However, our district attorney made it clear to us is that although it states mandatory, is any training that we provide. So it does not inhibit diversity, equity, inclusion training for students and staff. So if we mention that there's going to be some training around equity, the statements cannot be based on House File 802 that we cannot provide any training around diversity, equity, and inclusion. This House file does not inhibit it. It does not inhibit or violate the First Amendment rights of students or faculty or undermine the school district duty to protect to the fullest degree intellectual freedom and free expression. House File 802 does not prohibit the use of curriculum that teaches the topics of sexism, slavery, racial oppression, racial segregation, or racial discrimination, including topics relating to the enactment and enforcement of laws resulting in sexism, racial oppression, segregation, and discrimination. It does not exclude these words. So if I say oppression, the response should not be, you're violating House File 802. We can teach that within the parameters of House File 802. We just cannot teach that a particular race or particular sex is inherently racist or sexist. All right, now what? Well, like I've said many times, as a school administrator, we have to continue to use data. We have to let the data speak for itself. At the end of the day, we always have to look at the data to see how our Black and brown students, our historically marginalized students, doing in our schools. So we have to let that data speak for itself. And so we will continue to share data around our FAST scores, around our ASAP scores, around the many different assessments that we use to provide a snapshot of how our students are doing. We will continue to use that data and let it speak for itself. We will continue to embed equity work throughout curriculum and programming. We'll be more wise and strategic in the curriculum and programming and provide more voices and space for conversations and dialogue around the curriculum and programming that we choose to use around equity. We will target and invest in programming toward historically marginalized students. And here, this is one is very key. And so I want to pause here just for a second to make sure that we all understand is that when we look at the historical beginning of school systems, there is an assumption that the school system started equal. The school system did not begin equal. And so, but if we come with the mindset that the school system started equal, all things equal, then we can get a little bit of confusion around equity and what it means. And so in order to achieve equity, reaching toward justice, we have to target those who are failing in our system. And so I'm going to encourage our staff and our district to target and invest in programming toward those students who are failing in our system. Continue to invest in our building equity capacity team. I think the work happens more authentically when it happens within the building with teachers and with students. So we're going to continue to invest in our building equity capacity team. Recruit, hire, and retain and develop high quality staff embedded in equity literacy and understanding. It would be so refreshing as we begin to look and hire for next year to really begin to sharpen our skills around how we recruit, how we hire, and how we take care of those who are doing the equity work in our district. Finally, action items. I've shared this before with the board. We are in the process of developing a strategic equity plan. We have that in a draft form. The 4 areas that we are focusing on are curriculum, data, instruction, and mindset. We have received all of our equity audits. We have our elementary equity audits. Now our buildings have them and they're reviewing them with their staff. And we will continue to repeat those equity audits to get a snapshot of how we're doing and responding to what the audits reveal. I think one of the callers mentioned culturally relevant and sustaining pedagogy or teaching. We have plans to provide culturally relevant teaching in the brain book study around the work of Dr. Zavetta Hemmings. And then we're in the waiting. We've submitted an application for approval for a social and emotional learning curriculum. And finally, just from the Equity Office, we want to say Happy Hispanic Heritage Month. We realized that from September the 15th to October the 15th, we are recognizing and acknowledging our families, our Hispanic brothers and sisters in our community. And here are just a few things that we have provided or we have in place for our teachers to focus on centering classroom instruction. We have resources to share with our teachers if they want to be able to have some thought partners and co-planning around lessons that they can provide for their students. And then we have resources available for our teachers. And so again, we want to be more than a cultural event office. We want to make sure that the work that we're doing is providing academic outcomes for our students. Okay. What questions? Again, I went really fast through it. I'm really not a fast talker. So if you have questions of what I've shared, please at this time.
One quick question I have from early in the fast talking. The Critical Consciousness Family Learning Series. I'd heard a lot of good feedback about that from last year. Is any of that available like in a podcast type format or a format where people that are not able to make those specific meetings could still participate, view it? I think that would be helpful. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, that is a great suggestion. I know even with our critical consciousness training that we've done in the past, the questions have always come up in terms of how do you create a great and safe space where families can ask questions and feel okay asking those questions and it not be recorded. And so we've always wrestled with how do we provide it for those who are not able to attend. There could be an opportunity for Jessica and I to just do like a podcast recording just of the conversation without providing information or questions from families. So that's a great idea.
Yeah, just something to consider in the future because I know there are a lot of families that would like to know more, and it's very difficult to find time to get to a specific time every time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So many questions about House File 802. But for one clarification, you discussed specifically the prohibition against suggesting fundamentally, systemically racist, et cetera.
Yes.
But were there to be a classroom situation that was talking in a factual and data-based realm about wealth accumulation or access to housing or other specific concrete topics, that classroom discussion could proceed in a uninhibited and unrestrained way?
So if I understand your question, if there's a classroom discussion centered around accumulation of wealth and the conversation began to lean more toward the specific defined concepts, how will we handle that situation?
Well, or just, what happens in a classroom where a conversation has taken you to certain conclusions? You're sort of suggesting that that's okay as long as it's based in something rather than just a blanket ideological statement.
Yes. So the statements that I've shared with buildings that I've had the opportunity to go to is that, one of the policies gives us some guidelines around teaching controversial issues. And we have to continue to help our teachers know and understand that particular policy, where it reminds us that we cannot make blanket statements around a particular race or sex We have to be facilitators of conversation, and we have to allow space for different opinions and views. And so around the house file and how if a classroom gets into that point, we will help our teachers to understand how to get that conversation centered back to a place where all views are allowed to have that space. Again, we're fortunate enough to many of our teachers who have reached out who can get into those type of conversations in their classroom. They're very skilled in leading those conversations. However, they have, one of the languages that we use, you kind of walk, you kind of know you walk on like gingerly, or you got to watch out for landmines in those conversations. But we depend on the professionalism of our teachers to be able to facilitate those conversations.
Thank you. You've been busy. My goodness. Thank you. Thank you so much. It has been quite a year, quite a few years, and it's been tricky.
Yeah.
And you have been that voice of reason, calm, representing the district. And I want to thank you. You just thank your team. And I want to thank you and your team for your clarity, for staying strong in the core belief and the core needs of our students. So thank you. This is a lot of work, and it's a lot of work in any times, but it's a lot of work in tricky times. So I want to thank you for that. This is you've been incredible in this role. Thank you, Dr. Jones.
Thank you.
I had a question on, you mentioned the book study on culturally relevant pedagogy. Is that something that is PD for all teachers, or is it like building equity teams? Who will be participating in that?
Yeah, the way we structured it last year, because we had limited access to teachers, because we were virtual, we had different learning modules. We spent a lot of time going through a book study with the instructional coaches and coordinators. The next step is to provide that learning and book study with our principals and their building equity capacity team, so then they can begin to have that same learning with their staff. And so that is the process. And it was the only way to do it with the current structure that we had last year due to the closure and in and out different models. And so again, the process is we provided training for instructional coaches and coordinators. The instructional coaches will work with the building capacity team and administrators to begin to lead that learning within the buildings.
Thank you. I know we have some new staff this year, and it seems like a really great opportunity for them to participate in something like that. So thank you.
Thank you.
One question I had also related to professional development, I think, is it seems like the last couple of years, because of COVID, maybe we haven't been able to get a lot of the professional development fully rolled out that we had originally intended. So I don't know if this is really a question for you or more generally for the administrative team, but what does the professional development for the equity work look like as it relates to like the ESSER professional development, the other professional development I know Aaron's been talking about? I mean, how is this all going to be tied together? Like, are we going to see a plan maybe from like Dr. Vincent as far as what's this year look like for professional development, so we don't overwhelm our teachers, but that we know what they're going to get and that they're getting that?
Mm-hmm. And I'll say this quickly, and Superintendent Vincent, you can share, but we've also had the privilege this year of working with Aaron Miller, our new teacher and learning director, in which we've aligned the equity office and the teacher and learning department together. And so, and the reason I wanted to highlight that, because one of the words you'll hear me say a lot is that equity needs to be embedded in those departments, so it's not a separate thing. And so we've had a lot of discussions and planning in terms of how do we work together, so even when we're modeling, that equity is not something off to the side or an addition, or now we're going to switch to equity learning. And so what we're really doing is working together to embed the equity learning throughout all of our departments and our PD.
Interesting, Dr. Jones and I were having a piece of that conversation just earlier today in terms of that recognition that we are always going to be a district in flux, where you have individuals that have had access to training, you have new staff coming that come with a different skill set, and how do we, as we build those integrations across our curriculum, how do we also accommodate for the variation among us as adult learners? And I would say we don't have all of that figured out yet, but I do think it's realistic to expect in one of our updates as we move through the year, how does this support our overall set of goals for the district? And what does it look like over a longer period of time? We're very much in a more of a planning mode at this point than an execution. There certainly are things happening, but some of that conversation, I think, is headed in the right direction, and we'll be able to be shared broadly about how that all integrates and how within that we deal with the complexities. We're all learners at different stages, just like our students are.
Thanks, that would be great. I would love just as a board to have an understanding at some point in the future of kind of what is the plan of action for what's going to be done related to PD and just equity in general for the next year, because we've seen a lot of great things that have done over the past couple of years, but what's it look like going forward so that we can understand, the community can understand, and just kind of like, well, the example I use is kind of like Jerry does with the buildings, right? You know, we know what's going on over the next few years, just getting an understanding of that so we can make sure to support whatever you need to do that effectively across the district.
I was reflecting on your first action item, that develop the strategic equity plan. And I noticed in here earlier in your presentation was the Indianapolis trip that I had the opportunity to go, the equity. I'm going to get the wrong title of what we did there, but is it then the vision, that was equity focused strategic planning, then is it then the vision to have it all kind of like you're talking about with the professional development, to have it all embedded so that it is one plan? It's not, my assumption would be on the side as we had some of those discussion, it didn't encompass everything. Was my interpretation of that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and I tried to kind of title it that way in that section where I provided that information for the equity plan, but it's the strategic with the equity plan, equity centered in the strategic plan. And so we're really trying to get out of that mindset of saying the equity oriented strategic plan, and then the district strategic plan is over here, but really bringing it both together. And the part that you started out with, because you went down to Indianapolis with us, and so we've had to restructure the team that had the time to be able to meet. And so we really drilled down on focusing on the areas that we needed to focus on: the curriculum, the data, the instruction, and the mindset or / beliefs. And if you notice with those 4 titles, you know, equity is not even mentioned there. And so, however, that's definitely the lens that we're seeing our data, instruction, and our curriculum and mindset through. And so hopefully by the time we develop it, we're able to share it out with the board and with the community, it'll be laid out in a way that you'll definitely see equity embedded in the process.
I thought it was fascinating, our presentation earlier of the Spanish Heritage course. As the presentation was being held, I was thinking about those discussions that we had as a part of that equity-oriented strategic plan, and reflecting on how that is being carried out already. So a lot of the work is being done, even though you're still working on that strategic plan. So appreciate your leadership on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Jones. And we will take any comments from the public on the diversity, equity, inclusion update. And we have Angela Shaw. You've been given permission to speak.
Hello, Angela Shaw again here at 5411 Tennessee Street. And I'm speaking on behalf of ASAT, or Ames Youth School Action Team. We're focused on shining light on racial and ethnic disparities in the district. These disparities don't just include academic achievement, but they also include discipline, enrollment in advanced courses, and learning opportunities, as well as students having access to teachers who mirror their racial and ethnicity as a population. ASAT is speaking out tonight frustrated. that the district is not making progress towards equity efforts. They are not living up to their stated priority of educational equity and improvement. ASAT has been coming to school board meetings and individual meetings since 2017. Yes, 4 years. And we've been asking for transparency and accountability around equity in this district. These are 4 of the similar asks that we've asked. What is the current status of academic achievement gap? We've seen the same achievement gap all 4 years. And we've been asking about what is the mitigation strategies and strategies in the building to reduce the math, science, and reading gaps. In 2018, 3 years ago, the equity committee was formed and there was an equity report with recommendations. What is the status of those implementations of those recommendations 3 years ago? If the recommendations have yet to come to action, why? In 2019, 2 years ago, the equity reports for the Ames middle school and high school were completed by Dr. Spike and Swalwell. What is the status of those implementations of those requirements? And now we know that the elementary school audit was completed in spring of 2020. We have yet to see what those findings are and recommendations and a plan to implement them. In 2020, we asked about what is the ongoing training and support for teachers around equity in the classroom, as well as what are the onboarding statuses for those that are coming in the district. We appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with the Ames School District, but we want concrete, transparent answers to these questions. What is the school district doing on the building level to get rid of these disparities, not just in academics, but in all these other areas? These kids are suffering 4 years later, and we still are not seeing a reduction in academics or anything. Ames says that they are committed to equity, and we want to see that. Every year, ASAT hopes that we are no longer needed. We are no longer needed to come to these meetings and speak out. But the district still is not making true commitment. You have programs, but we're not seeing it result in students' behavior as well as academic achievement. We call for the Ames School District to take immediate action and put things into place in the building so these disparities can be reduced. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Eve Lederhouse. You've been given permission to speak.
Hi, thank you. I'm Eve Lederhouse, 1531 Linden Avenue, and I really appreciate the report that Dr. Jones gave and the clarity of how to interpret the new legislation. My question may sound like an issue of semantics, but I think it also speaks to consistency. If HF 802 prohibits labeling a race or gender as inherently, fundamentally, or systemically one thing or another because the words don't allow for the opportunity for change, it does make me wonder why the district continues to use the words historically marginalized for our current students, because that directs the hearer to only think of the past, not allowing for change. And also to violate point number 7, where Dr. Jones explained that we should not allow individuals to bear responsibility for the actions committed in the past. So I would just ask you to consider that terminology as you move forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Eve. All right, I don't see any other hands raised, so we will go ahead and move on to our policies for discussion. And I'm going to say, do we want to go through these? Did folks have questions about any of them?
As you see in the minutes from our meeting, most of them are a reflection of the changes of the House File 802 that we just received the report on today. So hopefully that provides some clarification.
The only question I had was about one of them being rescind. I think it's 404.10. And I just needed a little bit more about that one.
So I'll give you my perspective, and then I want Dr. Vincent or Kristen Johnson to give theirs. But I appreciate that our staff has been very organized in the way that they are presenting these to us, so we can see from our IASB review and the model policies, they're lining it up with what our current policy is that we're reviewing. And so this one was recommended from IASB to rescind it, because if you remember, we completed that total policy review that was completed by IASB this summer. So this is one of those that, that's the report that came back, and staff felt that it was, they supported that, just because a lot of it will be moved to job descriptions in the staff handbook.
Oh, so it was kind of duplicated. It's being duplicated
Right,
elsewhere.
yep,
Okay,
yep.
that's what I wondered.
Does that, feel free to add if there's.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board on the policies for discussion? Any comments from the public on the policies for discussion? All right, then I will go ahead and open our public forum, and I will read our statement on public comments. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes, once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And our first speaker is Christopher Kasich.
Hello, thanks for letting me speak again. I'm Christopher Kasich, 5616 Maryland. And I wanted to speak on some of the violence going on in the school. Today, there's a huge incident, shelter in place, a lot of kids scared, and that level of damage might have been an isolated incident, but my kids come home, and I can tell you in the past week and a half to 2 weeks, there's at least 5 other incidents besides that one. Kids fighting, kids getting pummeled too. Not a little in each other's face, and I don't know, because I haven't seen any emails about that from the school district or any way to change what's going on, find out what the nature of these problems is, but that's a lot of fights for a small amount of time. The safety of the kids does come first. I heard it a lot with the masks, I heard it with everything else, and it does come first. But how long until these keep escalating, until a kid actually seriously gets hurt, or God forbid, possibly killed? I think that a lot of it has to do with the divisive nature of Ames in the United States in general right now. And I feel that every parent should talk to their kids. We might see things differently. Like, my son's scared to speak up of any conservative values in school. Nothing even too hot topic-ish, but just in general. I was like, why don't you guys start some of you and some of your friends that feel the same way, why don't you try and start sort of young conservatives club, something like that. He's like, yeah, right. He's like, we'll be a target for not only kids, but even possibly some of the teachers. Now, I'm not saying that is, and that might, just because somebody feels some way, doesn't mean it's actually justified. Doesn't mean that it will happen. But there's something going on in the schools, unless I've missed something, and this amount of violence and fights happens on a consistent basis. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if the school's not aware of all these violent incidents happen, which would be hard to believe since they're on school buses, since they're in the school, or just that it takes a back seat to other issues that don't affect them as much. And I would really hope, and I don't assume it's the latter of the two. And I don't know, I think it's my job to start coming to these meetings more, being more involved, as I have been with my kids. I work in a factory, going in between 4 and 5 in the morning, I get off between 3 and 4 in the afternoon, go home, take my kids to sports, find every homework assignment that they're missing and try and help them with it. And I do it all alone. I'm still gonna find the time to get to these meetings and bring up these issues because they are important. These are important issues. And if I can find the time to do it, I urge all parents that are watching, listening, school board members, to be more involved, find out what's going on, talk to your kids. If I can find the time, I know there's plenty of people that can find the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. We will move to our online participants, and we have Joe Thompson. You've been given permission to speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, my name is Joe Thompson. I live at 926 South Dakota Avenue. I'm here to speak about the same issue that the previous speaker just addressed. I did the same thing at the last school board meeting. At that time, it was on the heels of multiple fights at the high school on the same day. I had sent an email to the superintendent, to the board, to the principal, and received several responses from them about how serious the issue was and how seriously everyone took it. My question was, what are we doing to address this issue? What is being done at the leadership level, in the schools, in the districts, to address this issue? And the point that I wanted to make at that time, and the point I'd like to reiterate at this time, it seems much like many other aspects of society, we tend to deal with things reactively. Is the reaction to every fight that happens in the school building, which seems completely bizarre to me, is the reaction to simply suspend or to expel the kids that are involved in these activities? That's very short-sighted, in my opinion. What are we doing to prevent these things? As the previous speaker mentioned, today we had a very high-profile incident at the middle school. I know many other middle school parents who have told me that in many ways, the violence that's occurring in our district is almost worse at the middle school level than it is at the high school level. Today, I heard from my daughter that there were another 3 fights. She said, I just assume multiple other fights at the high school level. What are we doing to address this issue? What is being done at the district level, at the administrative level, to deal with this issue? I would challenge the school board particularly because you are our elected representatives. You are the people that we have access to ask these questions. What are you doing to follow up with this? I'd like to see something on the next school board agenda. I know you have a lot of other issues that are important. I certainly understand that. I've paid attention. I've followed the last several meetings, and there's a lot of good things that are happening. But this is an issue that needs to be dealt with, and you are our representatives. I'd like to see it taken seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Peterson, you've been given permission to speak.
Hi, this is Jen Peterson. I just want to confirm you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Sabrina. I also am calling in regards to the incidents that happened today at the middle school and high school. I had emailed some administrators, and I appreciated their response when we had heard about the fights a couple weeks ago. And I think in light of today, just wanted to call in regards to that too as well. I know our family and several other families have concerns about school or student safety in particular, just wanting to create a safe environment for the kids to learn, but also just in protecting our students as well. One of the things that I'm hoping either the district could address or help is provide a little bit of context of what's going on, because I think it's something that I saw either on social media or just in parent groups that are trying to understand a little bit better about what's going on. Also, too, if there's any suggestions for promoting positive change, I think there's a group of people out there that really, truly care and want to be a part of the solution. And so any suggestions that you can offer, I know people want to step up and help. The second thing is just teacher safety and staff retention. I think there have been some staff that have been injured, and we care about our staff. We've got great people, and I want to make sure that we can retain them. it's super early in the year, and I know, and talking to one staff person in particular, they were concerned just about their own personal safety. And so if there's things that we can reassure our staff with, or even just provide some clear context and how to deal with those issues when they pop up and it's super hot, anything we can do to reinforce them would be great. And then third, and finally, I think if we can continue to develop our communication plan, I appreciate the emails from the district today. I think the one thing I've learned is we're in a whole new world from when I grew up, and gosh, kids have cell phones and social media is crazy. And so the reality is those things are hitting and getting communication out super quick. And I don't feel as if the response was too slow today. So I want to make sure I clearly communicate that. But I think if we could continue to develop that communication plan to figure out how to get accurate information out to the parents, that would be great. Because I know some parents were concerned and felt like they needed to go pick up their kids. I think too, they were scared if their kids were okay. And I think the more information that we can communicate, legally communicate, that would be really appreciated. And I do appreciate a pronged approach. So how do we deal with the immediate, but then how do we take care of the long term and how we can support students and support teachers and staff? Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. I am going to give a little wait time here. All right, seeing no other hands raised, I'm going to go ahead and close our public forum, and we will move on to our consent items, and I'll entertain a motion.
I move approval of consent items as presented.
Second.
Moved by Franzen, seconded by Colton. Superintendent Vincent.
Once again, it's my pleasure to identify and thank some donations that have been given to the district. We have a donation from Walmart Vision Center North, donation from Dog Eared Books, donation from Northminster Presbyterian Church, also the ISU Sorority and Fraternity Engagement, Sheila Cody, Jane Carter in memoriam of Bev Ross, and Alan and Sarah Dvorak. And this group of individuals have donated everything from cash, particularly for the food pantries, to school supplies, to some non-perishable sorts of items. And we certainly appreciate the generosity and thank them for their gifts.
Thank you. It was moved by Franzen, seconded by Colton. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Moving on to our action items, we have our new Ames High School construction project change orders.
I move the board approve the new Ames High School construction project change orders as presented.
Second.
Moved by Franzen, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. And our 28E agreements with the Woodward Granger Community School District for the Woodward Academy and Grandwood Consortiums for the 2021-22 school year.
I move the board approve the 28E agreements with Woodward Granger Community School District for the Woodward Academy and Grandwood Consortiums for the 21-22 school year.
Second.
Moved by Linkaitis, seconded by Colton. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Request for modified allowable growth and supplemental aid.
I move to approve the request for modified allowable growth and supplemental aid for the special education deficit for the 2020-21 fiscal year.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Franzen. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Board and staff items. Do we have, I did not take down any requests for staff for this evening. Anybody? Okay. Are there any other items from the board?
I just wanted to recognize one of our teachers. last week, Mr. Colin Record, I don't know if I say his last name, I think I mispronounced it.
No, that's right.
He had a really neat event after school. It was from like 7 till 9. I think he probably was there for hours. It was an astronomy project. So he had set up telescopes that, by the way, got anonymously donated by Johnny Carson, which is a really cool story. So call Colin and tell him to tell you that. But we got to see Saturn and Venus, and I want to thank him because that's his time, right? That was really cool. And when Saturn, we saw the rings, and right before he looked into the telescope, he said, it looks like somebody's dingling something in front of it. And you look at it, it looked like it was like a fake Saturn. It wasn't. So thank you. And thank you to Colin, and thank you to all of our teachers that they do things like that every single day. And I just happen to know that one, but thank you to all of our teachers for their hard work.
All right, items from the superintendent.
You know, we've had a pretty thorough conversation this evening, and I don't think I have additions other than just to express appreciation again to our administrative staff, our teaching staff, building staff, and to families and the students. It is going to take all of us this year pulling in the same direction to work through some of the issues that we currently are addressing in the district. And by and large, it has been very impressive, people's willingness to try to keep this a school district that's focused on high achievement for all children, and acknowledging that as we do so, we have some challenges we must address. So just want to express that appreciation and know that some of these items that have been raised, I try to take notes through the public forums, and we will think about how we can get some of that information back into our meeting structures. So there's additional communication for the community.
Thank you. All right, then we have our board planning calendar, which I did not open. But our next board meeting will be October 11th at 5:30 p.m. When is my last meeting? That's a good question. Is it
November.
November 8th. Okay.
When do we swear in the new board members?
It'll be the second meeting
Okay, that's what
in November because the canvas doesn't happen in time for this first meeting.
Okay, so November 8th will be here.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. I gotta get back to my agenda. All right. Then we will have we're gonna do our work session and then adjourn. Is that the plan?
Right.
Okay.
So if we could reconvene informally though, I think.
Yep.
Maybe a 5-minute stretch break and we'll reconvene.
And we will be ending the broadcast now as we move into the work session. The only thing we'll be doing when we return is to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.